Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, I want to do something a little bit different. Rather than focusing in on a very specific Imperial Guard thing, I want to zoom out and have a look at the big picture. I want to talk about the current state of Warhammer 40k. What is the meta like? What's happening over on the casual scene? And how is each faction doing right now? Are they having a good time smashing it? Or are they struggling somewhat? Essentially, what is the health of the 40k ecosystem nearly 2 years into 10th edition? And so without further ado, let's fix bayonets and charge right into this thing. First things first, I want to make something abundantly clear. This is going to be quite a broad brush, high level video. We're not going to be necessarily getting into the nitty gritty detail of each faction. There's also definitely going to be certain things that I'm going to miss. I have a very good perspective on what's happening with the Guard, but outside of that, I'm generally going off my experience playing against other factions to kind of get a feel of what's happening with them. So if you think that I've missed something, or if you think there's a point that I've not quite got right or just got flat out wrong, then please, I wholeheartedly encourage you to let me know. Put it down in the comment section, because I think that between this video and the comment section, between myself and the power of the internet and all of you guys, we should actually be able to put together a fairly good comprehensive take on where is 40k right now, how is it doing, and just what are the feelings within the community. So with all of that said, now let's get into the main meat and potatoes of this video, and let's look at how each faction is currently doing. And here I want to do a quick shout out to Meta Monday. This is a fantastic resource. It's a website that is run by a fellow Guard player, JCMS, and he every weekend pulls together all of the relevant tournament data, number of games won by each faction, number of games lost, the total win rate, how many events were won by each faction. It's a really good way of getting a peek into the meta, but also being able to keep the finger on the pulse of how each faction is doing generally. Now, I'm not going to be talking about any specific win rates today because those change all the time, and by the time I've recorded this video and then it's been edited, it's gone out, those win rates will have changed again. But instead what I'm going to do is look at the big picture with this data and get a sense of how each faction is doing. And I want to talk about how each faction is doing both in terms of, are they winning games? Are they competitive? But also, how does each faction feel? Are there loads of players? Is there great enthusiasm around it? Or is there a little bit of a cloud hanging over a certain faction? And if so, what are the factors that might be contributing to this? So in no particular order, let's start off with Black Templars. Black Templars are a faction which is struggling at the moment, both competitively and I would say casually. The faction seems to have lost its mojo somewhat. It seems to have lost a bit of its vim and vinegar. It just doesn't seem to be a faction that anyone is particularly enthusiastic about at the moment. Week on week, their win rate has been very, very low, and their number of games that they've been able to win just generally has been really bad, and there's been no significant tournament wins from Black Templars in a while. I think this points to a bit of a low point in the morale of this faction, and I think I can actually pinpoint exactly when this happened, because if I think back on how Black Templars have been doing for a lot of 10th edition, there was a time when the faction really seemed to be going from strength to strength. We had people taking them to tournaments and winning with them, and at one point Black Templars were considered a rival to Blood Angels as the premier assault loyalist chapter in the game. But there was a key moment when it all changed, and this was last year when the Black Templar Crusader Tide, the Black Tide, was nerfed. Essentially what happened is it was taken to the WTC Teams tournament, which is one of the biggest and most cutthroat Shark Tank competitive tournaments in the world. It's genuinely, or I would say the best of the best of the best, go to battle it out in big team games. What's important to understand is that it's a team tournament, which means that there is a certain amount of influence that can be had over pairings. And Black Tide was very much a stat check, a powerful stat check, but in a singles environment, there were plenty of factions that could blast through it. I mean, at the end of the day, it was very susceptible to blast weapons, and it was also very susceptible to just people bringing enough anti-horde. And it very much was, at the time, the place it was in the meta, one of the few Horde armies that was doing well, because early and mid 10th edition was very much typified by vehicle and monster heavy lists. But one of the players at the WTC team tournament took Black Templar Black Tide 8-0, 8 games in a row, undefeated, and when seen through the lens of individual placings, this guy actually ended up being the top place player at WTC. But it wasn't a singles event, it was a team event. And the reason that he did so well is that he's a very, very good player. Let's not take that away from him. But the fact that he was paired fairly consistently, not always, but fairly consistently, into armies that couldn't really pass the stat check. And so it looked like this army was amazing and unbeatable and could go against everything and beat it, but the reality was that there had been some pairing massaging because of the team's format. In response to this, Games Workshop quite heavily nerfed the Black Templar Tide, along with some other tactics as well, like Helbrecht with Sword Brethren and all this kind of stuff. And so a lot of the crutches that Black Templars had been relying upon were kicked out from under them, but there weren't many replacements that were offered, and the replacements that were offered, they didn't really feel very Black Templar. And so essentially what's happened is the faction lost its most iconic playstyle. It became way less efficient, way less fun, and it felt a little bit tainted. And ever since that point, the Black Templar win rates and sort of the feeling around the Black Templar community has been on a steady decline. The point now where many consider the Black Templars to be, and the data seems to show, that they are one of the bottom factions. I think personally there probably is plenty of play there. At the end of the day, Marines are actually doing quite well, but the fact is that the Black Templars have kind of, like I said, lost their mojo. And as someone who sort of lurks in a few Black Templar communities, the general feeling that I've had from the situation is, well, we're just hobbying right now. We're just going to spend the last sort of 12 months lovingly applying those chains to the weapons, the thing that they all love to do, and we're just going to get a hobby on. We're just going to build our forces up. We're just going to get some projects done that I've been sat on the back foot for a while, and we're going to wait until a balanced data set comes along that injects a bit of goodness into us. And if that doesn't happen until 11th edition, then so be it. Long story short, Black Templars took a big knock. They lost some iconic units and iconic play styles to nerfs, and ever since they've been on a bit of a downward spiral, and now they're kind of on a wait and see. Next we have Drukhari, the Dark Eldar. Dark Eldar are in a really crazy place at the moment, where they've got a fairly consistently low win rate. They're struggling to win games, and yet there are players who are going and winning events. Full-blown winning event. So it's this real dichotomy, this real paradox, because on the one hand you've got the general player win rate being very bad, but specific players doing very, very well. It's going to sound crazy, and I know a lot of Dark Eldar players are definitely going to push back on this, and please do so down in the comment section. I don't mind. I said that at the beginning of the video, like, if you think I've got a wrong or horrible hot take, I don't mind you passionately defending the position. I've got an open mind. I'd love to learn. But in a funny sort of way, I feel this is kind of exactly where Dark Eldar should be. When I was growing up, I know, boomer Mordian, but when I was growing up, Dark Eldar were the skill faction. It was always said that Dark Eldar were an army that if you didn't know what you're doing, you would be punished terribly. But if you were a good player, the sky was the limit. And we all have those stories. We all know that person that was so good with Dark Eldar that they seem to run rings around everyone and you'd leave your head spinning. Well, that's kind of where they are now. If you're a good player, if you can no-life that faction, if you will become the Archon himself, then you will be rewarded. But if you don't quite have the chops for it, the faction is going to leave you crashing and burning. Maybe that's not a good place for general accessibility for the faction, but it feels for the first time in a long time that Dark Eldar have kind of reclaimed their classic identity. I remember through a lot of 8th edition and 9th edition, Dark Eldar didn't feel like Dark Eldar were meant to feel like. They were running around with like unkillable taluses. It's like, hang on, that's not Dark Eldar. Dark Eldar were meant to be fast and fragile and high skill, not slow and being able to slug it out. I feel now that's exactly where Dark Eldar are. Fast, fragile, incredibly high skill. If you know what you're doing, you'll do well. If you don't, well, off to the gladiatorial pits with you. Coming in next, we have the Adeptus Mechanicus. In my opinion, the disaster story of 11th edition. They started off bad, got a codex which was bad, got a rewrite which got loads of points changes which didn't help them, and event just made them phenomenally expensive to collect, and then got a complete rewrite which didn't solve anything. I think they are a really, really good example of how wrong some things have gone. Not everything. I don't want to. This is not a dooming video. How wrong some things have gone with 10th edition, and it feels at the moment like GW's kind of given up on them. General consensus in the AdMech community, from what I can tell, is that you can win games with the faction, but by the time you get to even the end of an RTT, if you've put a single toe out of place, you've probably lost the game. And even if you manage to actually win your local RTT, or even do fairly well at your local GT, your brain is just leaking out of your ears because you have to put everything right every single time. Unfortunately, it just seems like the AdMech community is also a little bit split on where they want their faction to go. On the one hand, you've got people saying that AdMech should have good data sheets, but on the other hand, you've got people saying, well, Skitarii should be a bit of a horde, and all is wrapped up in the fact that AdMech units have some of the most expensive to collect, which you want them to be a bit hoardy, but you don't want to be paying the prices of a whole army with those boxes. It's all just a bit messed up. In my opinion, I think one of the big issues with AdMech at the moment, and why they've been struggling to really work in 10th edition, is they've only got about half a dozen kits. And every kit builds like 2 units. So you've got the Skitarii, which can build Rangers and Vanguard, and then you've got this big sort of servitor bots, which can build like Breachers and Destroyers. But there's only about 6 kits in the faction. And all of those kits, pretty much apart from like Stiltman, was designed in around 6th and 7th edition. So these kits were designed and include unit options and weapon options for over a decade ago. And they're kind of, I think, falling victim to this GW having this policy of, if it's not in the box, we don't make rules for it, and the only options you have are the ones that come in the box. Well, that works great with kits that have been designed with 10th edition in mind, but it really doesn't work when you've got units which were clearly built around being able to take like 3 Plasma Cavaliers in one squad, 3 of the Arquebuses in one squad, and now that you can't do that, you've got these units which can't take any synergy in the special weapons, and it's just, yeah. So I think AdMech, maybe this is appropriate, though, the technology they've got, it barely works for what they're trying to achieve in the modern day. Overall, AdMech seems to be another faction where the community has somewhat resigned itself to just waiting until 11th edition and hoping that this time they'll get a good roll of the dice. And if there's one faction that exemplifies that attitude right now more than anybody else, it is the Sisters of Battle. Roller coaster of emotions with Sisters in 10th, and right now they are just wallowing in a pit of despair. Everyone acknowledges that GW went way too far with the nerfs. At first they were doing very well, Miracle Dice were doing great, and then the Codex came out and everyone was like, yay, we gotta keep Miracle Dice. It turns out the Miracle Dice were a bit of a poison chalice, and by keeping them as a core army mechanic, Games Workshop just nerfed and nerfed and nerfed again. In hindsight is always 2020. In hindsight, it does seem like it would have been better if they'd got the Eldar treatment, where the whole manipulating dice mechanic went away, and you get something that's a little bit different. You get something that's a lot different, actually, but has a lot more, I would say, nuance to it, a lot more flexibility to it, a lot more tactical and strategic implications to it. By keeping Miracle Dice, it seems that Sisters ended up copping way too many nerfs, and at the moment the faction is just, it's got very, very poor numbers of players, it's got very, very poor numbers of win rates, and every Sisters of Battle player that I know, every single one, has put the faction on the shelf for now and is either trying out other games or going on to other 40k hobby projects. Next up we have Dark Angels. The general consensus around Dark Angels at the moment is that they do have some play. Dark Angels inside Gladiator Task Force still seems to be doing the lion's share of the work for the faction. The general consensus, there's a bit of disappointment around the Dark Angels detachments themselves not really feeling great. You still have people occasionally doing alright with them, going 3 and 2 or 2 and 3, sort of mid-tabling it, sure, whatever. But Dark Angels at the moment, they have tools at their disposal, but I think that a lot of them would like those tools to feel more uniquely Dark Angels than being essentially reskin Marines. I will, however, admit that I do a bit of a blind spot with Dark Angels. So if I've got a bad take there, or if I've missed some critical information, let me know. I have heard a lot of chatter about people saying that the Lion is doing well at the moment. People are liking the Lion. But I'm not sure if that's generally the enthusiasm around the lore about the Lion, because he seems to be quite badass at the moment, or his performance on the tabletop. So I'd love some extra insight and information from the community there. From the Angels of the Dark to the Angels of Blood, it is time for the Blood Angels. Doing great at the moment. They did have an exploit until very recently called Bloodless Angels, where if you didn't actually take any Blood Angel specific units like Sanguinary Guard and Death Company, you could actually benefit from the +1 to wound that Codex Marines gets, and then also all the benefits of like Liberator Assault Group, for example. That has now been closed, and yet the faction still seems to be looking very healthy. Good player numbers, solid win rates, people occasionally going 4-1. Not many big tournament wins since Bloodless Angels got knocked on the head. But overall, it seems like Blood Angel players are fairly satisfied with their position. Liberated Assault Group still allows them to chop the crap out of people. They're still pretty much the premier assault army, assault chapter of the Marines. I know, F in the chat for the previously mentioned Black Templars. And overall, Blood Angels are doing Blood Angel things. Not great, not terrible, totally okay. Pretty good morale in the faction. On a similar note, we've got World Eaters. World Eaters are really on a bit of an ascendancy at the moment, bit of a warpath. They are consistently going sort of 4 games and sort of 1 loss at tournaments. They're very much chopping the crap out of people the way they like things to do. The blood is flowing and Khorne is pleased. The big change with World Eaters from a meta perspective is Angron is a bit of a trap now. So at the beginning of the edition, it was Angron everywhere. Every single World Eaters army seemed to have Angron. Now they seem to have moved away from that because Angron costs quite a lot of points. And when you take Angron out of your list and you face off against a non-Angron World Eater army, it's like facing off against a veritable horde. They have so much stuff and it's all very, very, very choppy. They still remain a very one-dimensional army, but the community likes it that way. And at the moment, overall, the community's pretty excited. Sure, the Codex is only going to have 1 new model, but they're going to get a Codex. They're going to get lots of new detachments. And I'm sure there's going to be some big... There's rumors that there's going to be big changes around the way Blessings of Khorne works. But overall, right now, World Eaters seem a faction that's in ascendancy and seems to be doing what they love doing best. We've been talking a lot about melee. Now it's time to talk about shooting with the Tau Empire. So Tau are in a really strange position at the moment. Well, it's strange for them. this is going to sound like I'm bashing on the Tau, but I want to make something abundantly clear. I'm genuinely not. The morale in the Tau community at the moment seems to be quite low. It seems that a lot of them are quite despondent and they're not happy with how their faction is performing. This is in the face of the fact that the faction has got a sort of steady mid to high 40s win rate, which is in the Goldilocks zone, and the fact that every single week players may not be going and winning tournaments, but they are going 4-1, winning 4 games and only losing 1 at a GT is fantastic. They still seem to be able to win RTTs fairly well as well. Local Tau players around me seem to always be picking up an RTT win or podiuming fairly consistently. I think the issue that the Tau community has is a bit of an identity crisis. You have to remember that, and this is something that if you only played during 10th edition, you might find a bit strange, but Tau has been one of the big boys. It's been one of the boogeymen of competitive play. Every edition that I've played competitively, Tau have been one of the main faction, one of the head honchos, going in there, snapping necks and cashing checks. There's a reason why Tau has a bit of a few memes around it, with them like just going in there, like tabling people in like 2 turns. You know, Tau players and Tau guys and stuff like that. And that's not really what they're doing anymore. They're very much, they feel more like a Xenos Imperial Guard. They are less drop in and smash the crap out of people in 2 turns, and it's more of a, well, we're Guard but a bit speedier and a lot less indirect. Personally, as someone who has a Tau army, I am loving where the faction is right now, because I can play them like I can play my Imperial Guard, and I love that. And I do feel like this over-reliance on battlesuits is something that I like. But you have to remember that for decades now, the go-to Tau tactics have been take as many battlesuits as possible, have a go turn, and smash and table, deliver the killing blow. That's what it's been. And that's why you've seen, even though you've seen other detachments like Monka and Kayun do quite well, that's why for the longest time, although that seems to be shifting a bit now, Retaliation Cadre was so popular, because what's the battlesuit detachment? That one, I guess that's the one I'm going to take. That was what the Tau community was sort of saying to itself. So at the moment, I would say Tau, from a power point of view, is fine. It's just they're in an uncharacteristic position, an unfamiliar place. And for those of us that only play Tau casually or play into Tau, they're actually, for the first time ever, not a nightmare to play against. But for those people that play Tau, it's like feeling like they're mid-table, feeling like they're okay. That's not where they want to be. That's not traditionally why people have got into the faction. They've gone into the faction because they want to smash people. Personally, I think where Tau is right now is good. And I say that not, like I said, I say that from a totally unbiased point of view. I've been really enjoying playing my Tau recently, precisely because I've not just had to rely upon dropping in and ruin someone's game. Grey Knights are the next faction we want to give a quick summary to. Fine. There's not much more to say about it, to be honest. The Grey Knight meta competitively has shifted away from Teleporter Strike over to Warpbane Task Force, and I actually want to give a huge credit to the Grey Knight community, because they were really phenomenally annoying to play against for a lot of 10th edition, when they're just jumping up and down and there was zero interactivity. Now it feels like Grey Knights are actually willing to get into a bit of a scrap with you. They're still going to be fairly cagey, but they're going to be getting a bit of scrap with you, and they're going to be actually having a bit of a fight. So competitively, Grey Knights are feeling a bit more fresh, a bit more interesting, and they actually seem a bit more interactive. However, there is a little bit of a cloud hanging over the faction. Just, it's not clear skies, it's just kind of grey. Hey, I didn't even do that on purpose. Because the Codex is around the corner, and yet the only thing they really got for the Codex was an upgrade sprue to the Nemesis Dread Knight. And the Nemesis Dread Knight is a bit of a meme. It is a fairly terrible looking model. So, competitively, fine. Casually, things could be better. A very similar thing could be said about the Space Wolves. They are doing fine in terms of competitiveness. They're a solid mid-board faction. Despite everything, Thunderwolf Cavalry still is a fairly good option, although it now seems to be that Champions of Russ is the go-to detachment over Stormlands Task Force. Space Wolf players at the moment, though, their morale is, it's like 50-50. Because on the one hand, new models. And arguably some of the best looking Primaris models. Sure, it's just more Primaris, but kind of looks like they've got actually flavour and enjoyment around the models. Cool. On the other hand, they are staring down the barrel of apparently losing 20 plus datasheets. Which is a rumour, to be fair, but pretty grim. Right now, I think Space Wolves feel fairly conflicted, and the state of them is, let's see what the Armageddon book brings, and let's see what the Codex brings. So hype for the models, a little trepidation around maybe losing a few datasheets. Next up, we have got Knights of both the Imperial and the Chaos variety. Knights of all flavours are having a bit of a resurgence at the moment. Loads and loads of Knight players turning up at tables and doing very well with their armies. This is in no way surprising to me personally, because Knights are one of those armies that are fairly easy to get your head around. You've only got about 7, 8, 9, 10 models to manage. And also, they're relatively easy to paint. It's one of the great myths of 40k that infantry are quick to paint, big things are intimidating. But no, big models are way easier and way quicker to paint because it's just a bigger surface area to work with. So there's less fine detail that you need to get in there. So if you've got I would say an airbush, but even a rattle can and a dream, you can get a Knight army done in a couple of weekends. So Knights, and also a lot of players have them as either allies for their other armies, or just as a standalone army which they keep on the shelf, and whenever it's good for 6 months they bring it out, and then when it goes bad it goes back on the shelf again. Knights are in that phase right now where they're doing fine. They're popular. In terms of the meta around them, both factions seem to be spamming the baby Knights fairly heftily. It was a big problem with Chaos Knights. It's becoming a problem with Imperial Knights. If you're facing off against them, you need to be able to kill 2 to 3 small Knights a turn every turn. If you can't achieve that, you need to go back and add more anti-tank into your list. Speaking of anti-tank, one of the other reasons Knights are doing quite well at the moment is that there's been a bit of a shift in the meta, and I'll speak more about this later on. There's been a bit of a shift in the meta and the state of the game from vehicle-dominated armies to elite infantry armies. As a result, people have started to take less pure anti-tank and more sort of anti-infantry and anti-elite infantry, thinking plasma. They're taking plasmas over las cannons. But if you've got less anti-tank, then Knights can start doing a bit better. So they're a bit of a gatekeeper, as they always have been, but they're also a bit of an anti-meta faction at the moment as well. Chaos is next, of the Space Marine variety. Heretic Astartes are in a bit of a chill place at the moment. They, earlier in the edition, went through some pretty heavy nerfs, but with the Codex coming out and them getting the Creations of Bile with Grotmus, overall, the community seems kind of happy where they're at. They've got multiple viable detachments. They've got Creations of Bile, they've got Renegade Raiders, even seeing some good use out of Pack-Bound Zealots. Variety is the spice of life. A lot of other factions are relying upon a single detachment to do the heavy lifting. That's not the case with Chaos. My general feeling from talking to people in the community and sort of reading through forums and stuff is that Chaos Space Marines are kind of happy where they are. They can win games. They're not necessarily winning tournaments, but they can win games, and they can turn up to tournaments and feel like they're going to have a good time and have a good experience. And they can mix things up. They can try out multiple different detachments to keep things fresh and interesting and keep things engaging for them. So overall, Chaos, not the most powerful faction right now, but one that has plenty of play and plenty of fun. From Heretics to Xenos, let's look at the Tyranids. Fine. Good. Decent. Nothing wrong with them. Tyranids have kind of settled into a very comfortable mid-board position at the moment. They still occasionally win a tournament here and there, and they have a fairly good number of players that are engaging with the army, which is fantastic considering they're, well, in theory, one of the poster boy factions. There is a little bit of, in the casual scene, a bit of confusion, maybe a bit of despondency, because at first it looked like Tyranids were going to be, oh, the 4th Tyrannic War, that's what launched 10th edition, and then we've not really heard anything about them. But at the end of the day, they did get a whole bunch of new models, they had a big range refresh, they've had lots of things to enjoy, and overall the faction seems to be performing fairly well. However, the faction started off with Invasion Fleet, continued with Invasion Fleet, and then has ended with Invasion Fleet. They've basically only really had one detachment that's been worth a fart the entire edition. Occasionally, Vanguard Onslaught rears its head for a few months because everyone forgets how sneaky it is, and then people remember, beat the crap out of it, and it goes back down again. And Crusher Stampede had been doing well for a time, although seems to have dropped off somewhat. But really, it's Invasion Fleet. To me, Invasion Fleet is the dressing gown and comfy pair of slippers of the Tyranids. It's a detachment which they know, they love. Yeah, maybe it's getting a bit stale, but Tyranids have at least got a wide variety of models, where even if they're still using the same detachment, at least they can keep things fairly fresh by putting different models into that detachment each time. Overall, a fairly normal place, 3.6, not great, not terrible. Well, we've talked about one side of the Tyrannic War. Now it's time to talk about the other with the Space Marines. Space Marines are doing good at the moment. Damn good. Player numbers are surging. One of the most played factions right now. And a big part of that is because they got their boost. They got their buff to Oath of Moment. And it's Guilliman. Yeah, it's Guilliman, guys. It's Ultramarines. It's Guilliman. It's Gladius Task Force. That is the Space Marine meta right now. Take Guilliman and oath the crap out of your opponents. It is a bit of a crutch, though. And there are some murmurings and there are some wonderings that the faction might be standing on shallow foundations, built on sand rather than on rock. Because if Guilliman gets a nerf and Manius Calgar as well, then perhaps the faction will start to struggle big time. But those are only rumours and superstitions and worries. At the moment, the poster boys of 40k are eating good and doing good. Morale is high and people are loving playing them. Now it's time to get mean. It's time to get green. It's time to look at the Orks. Playing Orks right now is like being on a roller coaster. It's incredible heights and terrible lows. Orks just were having a great time. Tactical Brigade, followed by Mordaka, 2 free detachments that massively revitalized the feeling around the faction after Bully Boys and Green Tide got nerfed into oblivion. But the good times couldn't last forever, and Mordaka is now considered to be dead. People have been saying things like Dreadmob can outshoot Mordaka, which is fairly abysmal. Feelings around Orks right now is that they just they just wish that they could have something good that lasted longer than a couple of months. Bit of flux, bit of despondency, but at the end of the day, they are Ork players. So if things go bad, they're just going to retreat into the mech workshop and start building more models and just getting on the hobby side of things. I think Ork players, they almost wish they could wait out 11th edition. Wait out till 10th edition to 11th edition, I should say. But they keep getting all these new detachments, which is great, but they keep getting their hopes up and then getting their hopes dashed. The Adeptus Custodes! Yes, the yellow banana boys are back. Oh my god, are they back. Currently, the most played faction in 10th edition. And it's all down to Lions of the Emperor. That detachment has completely revitalized the faction, and Custodes players are riding high at the moment. Now, Lions of the Emperor is very good. It's game winning, it's tournament winning. The big question is, right now, will the detachment get nerfed? Because we've seen them do it with Bridgehead, we've seen them do it with Mordaka. Will they do it with Lions of the Emperor? I know Custodes players right now are like, don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Don't do that, Mordian. Custodes are having a great time right now. The reason why they're such a popular faction is because they're relatively beginner friendly. In comparison to a lot of armies, even when you buy from Games Workshop, somewhat affordable, easy to paint, and easy to manage because there's less pieces on the board. And they've just got fantastic stat lines. But there is a bit of a sword of Damocles hanging over the faction around Lions. It's very good now. Will it be good in the future? One of the classic opponents of the Custodes, the Genestealer Cult, is having the exact opposite experience. Genestealer Cult seem to actually have a fairly decent win rate. And GW seems to have settled upon the ambush mechanics of being able to recycle certain units, and overall the faction should be doing well, but the player numbers are low. And I think that there's more real world reasons why the player numbers are low more than in-game reasons. Genestealer Cult is a very niche faction, and it's also one that tends to be a third if not fourth army for a lot of players. There are relatively few people who have Genestealer Cult as their first army. They're quite weird, they're quite wacky, they're quite wonderful, they're very, very quirky. The lore around them is bonkers and brilliant. And so that tends to manifest itself in passion projects. And so I think what we see with Genestealer Cult is they're often more of a hobbyist army first, a player's army second. And I think that's why, despite the fact that Genestealer Cult have multiple times over the last few years, both in 9th edition and in 10th edition, been a totally viable, totally competitive faction, we don't really see huge player numbers from them. Even when they're at their absolute best, they only tend to have like 20 or 30 players being recorded on the tournament data each weekend. That's kind of where they are right now. They've got a good win rate, they can do good things. It's just that the competitive players' numbers aren't really there. Personally, I'm struggling with my Genestealer Cult at the moment because I don't like the way Cult Ambush works. I don't like the idea that, your whole army rule is you get a couple of free units. I really like the way Genestealer Cult used to work with the blips in 8th edition. That's what got me into the army. And I would like to see that come back. It feels like Genestealer Cult kind of suffer a little bit the same as AdMech. Games Workshop just struggled to get the feel of the faction right. And I think a big part of that is because 10th edition has hugely reduced randomness and quirkiness out of the game. And there are certain factions that are built around being random and quirky. And so they can have the ability to win games, they can have relatively solid rules, but they can sometimes struggle to capture the players because they don't feel the way like they should play. And that's kind of where I feel Genestealer Cult are right now. They've got good rules, but their identity is somewhat vague at the moment. But one faction which is not vague, one faction which sees very clearly at the moment, is the Eldar. A recent Codex receiver. They have come on to the competitive scene in full force and are loving it. They have even copped quite a few nerfs, and that has not stopped the Eldar fun train. They have jumped into being one of the most popular factions, rivaling Custodes and Space Marines in their popularity. Dying race, my ass. And the big reason for that is because they're quite an elite army, so like Custodes, it doesn't take too many units to get them to work. And whilst there is absolute standout detachments like Devoted of Unid, which is hard carrying faction at the moment, they've got plenty of other detachments which actually seem fine. You've got Aspect Host, which is doing great. And Windrider Host is subtly doing quite well. Eldar at the moment are doing good. There's high morale around the faction, although people expect there to be nerfs to the Votes of You Need. But things are looking pretty positive for them. However, all of that is from the Eldar player's perspective. People playing against Eldar are grumbling, and they are grumbling a lot. Devoted of You Need is definitely causing some problems and some ill will. And Eldar are one of those factions which people love to hate on. Like, Eldar and Tau are the most hated factions in the game, edition in, edition out. And it's because they've always seemed to have some crazy, janky bullshit. And that's where Eldar are right now. It'll be interesting to see how many Eldar players stick with the faction if they do get heavily nerfed. And it'll be interesting to see how people react to them getting nerfed. But at the moment, Eldar players are loving it. People playing against them, not so much. Let us now talk about the natural adversaries of the Eldar, the Necrons. If there's one faction which can say it's had a great time in 11th edition, the Necrons. They started off the edition great, and they're still great now. Hypercrypt Legion hype seems to have fallen off a bit. Good, I was sick of them teleporting all over the bloody place. It seems that Arse Shatter Arsenal and Awakened Dynasty seem to be the go-to for the community at the moment. There's a lot of hype around Oricon leading a big blob of warriors. And I just want to do a shout out to Salty Simon. Because Salty Simon, if you go back and look at all the battle reports I've done with him, with his Necrons, he was on the Oricon blob a year ago. Crazy. But yeah, Necrons continue to chug along, winning games, having a good win rate, having a good number of players able to go 4-1 at tournaments, still fairly reliably winning an event every couple of weeks. Necrons are just solid, really solid. And if there's been one faction that if you started the edition with, and you've just been able to just cruise along, just enjoying yourself, it's been Necrons. I would say one of the big winners of the edition and one of the best factions generally out there right now. Imperial Agents, they exist. And there's not much to say about Imperial Agents. I don't want to completely dismiss them. A lot of people, when they talk about agents, just breeze past them. I am going to do that to a certain extent. They've not really taken off as a standalone faction, although it is worth noting that Imperial Agents actually do quite well. They're a solid army. It's just most people don't take them seriously enough. But I know a few people that have been going to tournaments with them and have been very, very happy with the results. We've been talking about Eldar and Imperials for a long time now. Let's get a bit more chaos in our life with my personal favourite and patron god, Nurgle and the Death Guard. Death Guard started out the edition in quite a shit place. But they've been solid for a long time now. It's gone from diarrhea to just a good log. I'm sorry, awful, I know. But they are doing good. And it's all about Plague Company. Flyblown Host seems to have not really taken off all that much. But Death Guard, they're on the cusp of getting a codex soon. It'll be interesting to see what Games Workshop does with them. They don't really need much in the way of fundamental rewrites. They just need a bit more variety in terms of the detachment to give people a bit of a palate cleanser and to be able to mix things up a little bit. But at the moment, and for a while now, Death Guard have just been trucking on. They've been winning games. They've been having a half-decent win rate. And the faction, it feels, in a fairly positive place, which is very on brand because look at all those poxwalkers. They're always smiling. They're always grinning. Grandfather Nurgle is a generous god who loves his children. That covers the general feeling around Death Guard. As for their meta, it's Terminators. Terminators and Mortarion are doing a lot of heavy lifting. Next up, we have the Squats, the Leagues of Votann. They're in a pretty middling position. Not great, not terrible, just doing okay in the mid boards. They do have some jank that they can throw out there, like triple Hecaton Land Fortress, which, if you're not ready for it, can be a tough nut to crack. Overall, though, we've not really seen Leagues of Votann win any tournaments in a long time, but they've had a fairly solid win rate, so individually being able to win games consistently for a little while now. I think what the faction really needs, and what I think the win rate doesn't really show, and it's kind of hiding, it needs new models. It really, really does. It's been, what, 3 years since the faction came out? 2 or 3 years? And they've still not had a second wave? Really feels like GW just released the initial models, bit of a cash grab, and then have left them. Votann players are fine with how their faction is performing, but they are desperate, and I cannot emphasize that enough. They are critically desperate for some new units. Anything they don't even have to be good, just anything so they can build something different, enjoy something different, and just use something different as well. Whilst we're on the topic of Xenos, we should talk about the Alien Hunters Deathwatch. What a comeback story. Better comeback story than Kim Kardashian. Deathwatch went extinct, and it was heartbreaking because they're one of the coolest armies in the game. And due to public outcry, GW brought them back. And oh boy, are they back. Uppy, Downy, Indominator kill teams are great. They're really, really, really good. And I think Deathwatch have had a new lease on life. I think just coming back from the grave has really invigorated the community, invigorated the faction. And I think it's been a great success story for 40k in general. Nobody likes it when a faction gets squatted. Nobody wants to see that. I joke and I meme and I banter about, you know, squatting Eldar and squatting Tau often, like my live streams and stuff. But nobody, we don't want to see them go. If they squatted Tau, the guard players, we'd lose our number one rivals as like the shooty guard, you know, GEQ faction. You know, they're the reason guard players hate Tau, because we see them as on our turf, you know. But it's very much a friendly, competitive feeling. And, you know, everyone loves to hate on Eldar. We can't get rid of them. Got to have someone to unite us all against. Got to rally around the anti-Eldar flag. And it's the same with Deathwatch. Not in terms of hating them, of course. No, they're a fairly beloved faction. But nobody wants to see them go away. And the fact that they almost died, and it just goes to show, that if you give a faction just a little bit of love, a little bit of attention, they can come back from extinction. Because before they got their new index, Deathwatch numbers were really, really, really low. Like, but no one was playing them. No one was buying them. Games Workshop just puts a bit of thought, actually writes a half decent index for them, and they're flying. To put it in perspective, there are currently, fairly consistently, more people being recorded playing Deathwatch than Sister Battle. But what? No one's saying Sister Battle should be squatted. That kind of proves my point. Sister Battle got bad rules, and people are really low on them. Been nerfed to crap. People are really low on them. Deathwatch got a bit of TLC. And they're flying high. We'll finish off before we get to guard, because I have been saving the best till last. We'll round out the non-guard factions with some chaos. Chaos Demons and Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns need a codex. Player numbers are low, win rates are high, so the army has play. It's just been basically Index Magnus for 2 years now, and I think we'd all quite like to play against something else if that's okay. That's what Thousand Suns are. As for Chaos Demons, from a meta point of view, they right now seem to be one of a handful of factions competing for best faction at the moment. Phenomenal player numbers, event wins coming out the wazoo, win rate coming out the wazoo, game wins coming out the wazoo, everything coming out the wazoo. So Nash is very happy. Chaos Demons having a great time. The big thing that seems to have invigorated them is Shadow Legion. Now, Shadow Legion is where you can take demons and Heretic Astartes basically together. And I have a conspiracy theory around this, which is GW is preparing people for demons to be soft squatted. They're not getting a codex this edition, and there's a lot of people saying, and there's a lot of rumors being said, that they are going to get folded into the main Chaos Codex. Like Heretic Astartes is going to have loads of demons in there. There's rumors around like Lorgar coming back as the next demon Primarch. He's Chaos Undivided. He loves his demons, so that would kind of make sense there. Lorgar being the word bearers, not world bearers, the word bearers Primarch. But I have a conspiracy theory that GW knows if they just like out of the blue just bang 11th edition squat demons, that they're going to get a lot of pushback. So I suspect that they have released Shadow Legion as a way to massage and prepare the demon community for the coming merger with Heretic Astartes. Because if you encourage demon players to buy and collect and mix into their armies a bunch of Heretic Astartes for 12 to 18 months, and then they get used to having those units in their army. They get used to expanding their collection. They get used to not being a solo demon player anymore. And then 11th edition comes around, Heretic Astartes and demons get merged together, and the demon players, rather than being like, what the hell, man? I've not got any Chaos Space Marines. This is completely buggered. Instead, they were like, I've already got about 90% of the models that I need. I've already got about 50% of the models that I need. All I need to do is buy a couple of Predators, bit of this, bit of that. Yeah, maybe a couple of $100. It's not cheap, but it's not expensive. Yeah, I'll do that. It's fine. I can do it. That's what I think GW is doing. If they're not doing that, it's crazy. They do end up just like hard squatting them and not letting them merge. Yeah, that would be bonkers. But I think that's my conspiracy theory Games Workshop. They're getting demon players ready for the merger. In a weird sort of way, I'm totally okay with that. I would much rather Games Workshop did something like that and gave players a chance to adapt their collections than they just came in and went and just, smashed it. Looked it up. So I think that's what's happening, and weirdly I'm kind of okay with it, because if they're going to make changes like that, at least do it in the way they seem doing it, which is in a clever, concise and thought out manner. But there's one faction we haven't talked about. The best faction. My favourite. His Imperial Guard, the Emperor's true finest. It's time to talk about the Guard, baby! Yeah, buddy. Yeah, but it's time to talk about the Guard. It's weird. It's crazy at the moment. Guard is in such a mad place. Because on the one hand, we're one of the most played factions currently. But on the other hand, there does seem to be some general torpor around the faction. Some people are really enjoying the way Guard's playing. Some people are really struggling with the way Guard's playing. There's definitely a bit of a schism in the community. Right now, the Guard win rate is sitting in the low 40s. 40 to 45%. And the player numbers are great. We're one of the top 8 most played factions. I think we're the 5th most played faction at the moment. So lots of players, which makes sense. We've just had a codex release, lots of people jumping on it. I know so many people that said, I won't play Guard until they release Plastic Krieg. And those people have put the money where the mouth is, and they've been getting loads of plastic Krieg. But then at the same time, it feels like the army's a bit expensive at the moment. Real money-wise, of course, but also points-wise. I've been finding, and I know a lot of other people have been finding, it difficult to really feel like you're getting enough in your army. Like, it's like, oh, I just can't quite get my secondary game and my primary game and my indirect fire and my damage dealers in just the right ratio. We're struggling a bit in that regard. So the points, I would say, are slightly high. They don't need a lot. I'd say like a 5 or 10%. If you could squeeze in an extra 100 points in a typical list, that I think would fix 90% of the feelings of frustration around Guard at the moment, because you just need a little bit more wiggle room just to be able to dot the I's and cross the T's, as it were. Also, people are really hacked off about Armageddon not having anything to do with Steel Legion and Yarrick coming back. There's definitely a bit of casual sadness at the moment in the community. But then all of this is kind of, that's all on one side, but then all of this is kind of balanced out by the fact that we're winning tournaments and we're winning games. Hammer of the Emperor is a really strong detachment. And people love Hammer of the Emperor because it's the tank detachment. And Guard players love tanks. We love tanks. And so the tank detachment being one of the best ones is great. We love that. And then Combined Regiment being good as well. Oh, awesome. I think one of the big things with Guard at the moment is it feels like we have very, very few ways of interacting with melee. And we're in a melee meta. So, in summary, the Guard is a popular faction, but it feels like there's a bit of a disparity between the different detachments. It feels like some detachments don't play the way that I want them to play. I want my Hammer of the Emperor to be about tanks, and it is somewhat, but Tauroxes do better in it. And the points just seem a little bit tight at the moment. But overall, I think from a power point of view, Guard is good. I think from a flavor point of view, and perhaps a perception of how the faction should play point of view, it feels a little disjointed. Now, there is one faction we've not talked about, and that's because they're not here yet, but I think they do deserve an honorable mention: Emperor's Children. They will be here in a week or so at time of recording, and I think that they could be quite a disruptive force. On the one hand, they may just be another melee army, but I think that they will be able to brawl with the best, like World Eaters, but also they've got some half-decent shooting that shouldn't be underestimated, and they're very, very fast. Speed will be a defining thing of them, and the amount of pressure that they can put on you could catch a few players off guard. And as we look at the big picture at a moment, melee is very, very important right now. But that covers all of the specific factions. Now let's zoom out and look at the big picture. Let's start off with, where is the meta going right now? What is the big trends that we're seeing? What are the kind of armies that seem to be very popular and seem to be doing well? So for the longest time, 10th edition has been a vehicle and monster meta. That's where the best units have been. That's where the best performing lists have been focused. Vehicles and monsters. However, as I've sort of hinted at a few times in this video so far, I think that is massively, massively changing. I don't think we are in a vehicle and monster meta anymore. I think we are in an elite melee infantry meta, specifically melee. I think elite shooting armies are still okay. I think they're fine. But we're talking about what's on the cutting edge. What is the kind of playstyles which are dominating so much, which are so popular at the moment. And it does seem to be, first and foremost, melee is more powerful over shooting. And secondly, it seems to be elite melee. I think there's a number of reasons for causing this. I think the way things have been nerfed and buffed. I think that traditionally things that have kept melee in check, like indirect fire, have been nerfed, and nerfed again. But also I think there's been certain changes to stratagems that make melee so good. Like heroic intervention is now possibly one of the best stratagems in the game. Before, it was considered a bit of a joke. No one bothered with it. And I think a huge part of it, though, is terrain. So melee armies in general have received quite a few buffs. Elite infantry in general seem to be quite efficient at the moment. But terrain has really given these guys the edge. Because especially if you look at UK boards, UK and Europe is dominated by WTC terrain and UKTC terrain. Both of these are very, very dense. WTC is insanely dense. Like every single objective will be on a line of sight blocky ruin that you can hide behind. Every single one of them. Units can quite easily move from one ruin to the infantry, specifically because they can go through ruins, can go through one ruin to another without exposing themselves, with almost being safe to overwatch. And you can charge from ruins and probably make the distance, and again not trigger overwatch. So the dense terrain has allowed infantry, dense terrain has made infantry become more prevalent because they need to be going through the ruins, not going around them. And also the dense terrain, coupled with the fact that indirect fire and a lot of deep strike units as well have been nerfed. Like 3-inch deep strike's gone to 6-inch now for like everyone. It's easier than ever to stage up in these ruins, and it's easier than ever to essentially close the distance. So I think that's a huge reason why, especially on WTC boards, and they are becoming more and more popular, that's why we're seeing melee infantry doing very, very well. But even on UKTC, so recently I was at the Manchester Super Major, like a 300 plus tournament, 300 plus player tournament, and 5 out of 5 games I faced assault orientated armies. Every single army was primarily focused on assault, not on shooting. And that, UKTC is fairly dense. It's still way denser than GW, but it's not even as dense. It's not as dense as WTC. But even in that situation, it was dense enough that people could stage comfortably and then launch units out. And there's just, because a lot of these objectives are on ruins, it seems like there is this idea that you sit a unit or so on these objectives, and then whenever your opponent tries to move on to objective, because melee can charge the walls, they can charge what they can't see, but shooting units can't shoot what they can't see. You can move out and then charge to the wall, and you can push a shooting army off an objective, but a shooting army can't do the same to you because you can just hide behind. So melee armies really seem to have the momentum, and what's interesting is if you can sort of take the initiative away from them, they do start to struggle a bit. There was a guard player recently who went 7-0 at the Sheffield Super Major, played into, I think, 5 out of 7 games or 6 out of 7 games, played into predominantly melee armies, and he was able to win because he was a shooting army, but he had lots of Kazakin inside Toroxes, which could go zoom, almost act as pseudo indirect fire, jump out and blast people. And because then there was less of these units that could like stage onto objectives, he could then, and because he took the momentum away from the melee armies, he was able to sort of force the pressure back. And I think that's where it is. It's not. You could say it's melee armies, you could say it's elite infantry. I think that's the simplest way of categorizing it, but it's right now what seems to be so prevalent, and it's easier to do with melee than it is to do with shooting armies, is pressure. Movement. Movement wins games. That's always been true, but I think we're really seeing it now. What's interesting is most of the time in the US, people play on GW terrain. Now, GW terrain is a lot more open. It's a lot more open. It's still dense, but it's more open than WTC and it's more open than UKTC. Even on those boards, melee is on the ascendancy. Melee is on the warpath. Close combat is the name of the game. Although shooting armies still have abilities to still have the capability to keep up. But that's really, really where we are right now in the big picture of the 40k competitive meta. Melee is king, infantry is king, elite infantry is king. Hordes are not doing so good. Vehicles are still good, but they're not king anymore. And you either need to be able to, you either need to be a melee army, or you need to know how to counter them if you want to do well in the current environment. Speaking specifically about Guard for a moment, I think this is why Hammer of the Emperor has been so successful, because of the speed it gives you and the ability to get round terrain and get into the enemy. But that's all well and good talking about the factions and the play styles, but what about the players? You see, there's been some chit, and dare I say chat, around the proverbial internet water cooler recently about 40k. And opinions are split and divided, but there seems to be a general negative attitude towards the game at the moment. And I believe there are a number of factors to this. I think on the casual side of things, people are... When I say casual, I don't mean that like, oh, you don't play the game well. People always criticize me for using the term casual. I just mean it from the non-competitive sense, playing at home with your mates, being a more narrative player. Okay, it's not meant as a derogatory term, just my sort of throwaway term. But from the casual point of view, the game is lacking flavor. One of the biggest complaints I hear in my community and around the internet and in real life, talking to real people, the game needs more flavor. The game has become a little too predictable. Like, I'm going to have a unit and it's going to have 100 attacks. It's going to have 4 rerolls to hit, 4 rerolls to wound. It's going to have lethal hits and sustained hits. And I'm going to charge it into this other unit. And the outcome is a foregone conclusion. And I have to say, when I think about it, I can't remember the last time that I saw one unit engage another unit and the desired outcome not be achieved. I think that's possibly one of the biggest complaints about 40k at the moment is it's a little predictable. Outcomes are set in stone, and in comparison to games, let's say such as Old World, there's less randomness. Now, random doesn't necessarily mean roll a dice on a 3+, unit explodes and dies, and a 4+ it does what on a 1 to 3 it explodes and dies, and a 4+ it does what you want. That's a different kind of randomness. What I mean is, like I said before, it's very much 1 + 2 = 3. And I think what people are kind of looking for, and what you get with games like Old World, for example, is because there are less dice involved and because there are less rerolls involved, you might statistically roll 10 attacks and you should hit on 3, so you should hit with most of them. But then you just roll it, it's like, oh, I only got 4 hits. You can't re-roll them because there's no rerolls in the game. Well, there's very little rerolls in the game. So from definitely from the casual and non-competitive side, it does feel like things are a little too predictable. And that's one of the bigger grumbles. There's also a bit of a grumble about the fact that everyone waits for their codex to come out, and then they end up using the same detachments they did in the index as an element of that. It's like there's this weird combination of like there's power creep but codex sleep. Like the codexes aren't really doing much, but there are certain. But as the game has gone on, it has become way more lethal. It has become way more efficient to be able to kill units. And I think 40k, personally here, I'm injecting my own personal opinion here. I think it has lost its way slightly because at the beginning of the edition, they said no rerolls. We've reduced all the rerolls, no rerolls. And then as we are in, at this point in 10th edition, everyone's got rerolls coming out the wazoo. seems every faction has got some sort of reroll, or if they haven't got reroll, they've got sustained hit, which basically, either way, they're getting the results that they always want. So there's a bit of lack of flavor. There's a bit too much predictability. There's an element of codex sleep, and people almost dreading their codexes coming out, because 10th edition is also seen a bit as the addition of loss. Way more units have been removed from the game than in any other time that I can ever remember playing 40k. Units removed, things going, things don't even go to legends anymore. Things just get flat out removed. So even though I would argue quite strongly that balance in 40k, there's a few outliers. There's like 4 or 5, maybe 4 or 5 factions at the bottom which are a problem. There's like 1 or 2 factions at the top which are a problem. Everyone else is kind of where they should be in the middle. The balance is pretty good. The meta's shifting towards melee, fair enough, but the balance is generally good and player numbers are good. We're seeing weekends with like 1,000 players, which is amazing, but it's got these issues bubbling underneath the surface, and I feel quite strongly like the main focus of 11th edition should be to bring us slightly back from the competitive edge, just slightly. I think a lot of things have been sacrificed in the name of balance. I think a lot of flavor has been sacrificed in the name of balance. I think a lot of units have been sacrificed in the name of balance. I think a lot of mechanics have been sacrificed in the name of balance. I think as the game has become more and more competitively focused, we have achieved something which has never been achieved before in 40k. We've got a glimpse of the game being relatively balanced. Not perfect, but relatively. More balanced than it ever has been before. That's one thing 10th edition's done well. But it's come at a big cost. What I would like to see from 11th edition is for the game to come just a little bit back from that precipice. And I'm sort of shooting from the hip from now. I'm off the cuff, but things are occurring to me, and I'm saying them as they pop into my head. One of the big things that I would say is you want to try and understand the competitive player's mindset. Why has 10th edition gone in this direction? Why have we lost flavor? Well, most the people that are generally at the cutting edge of the competitive meta, many of them have beautifully painted armies, and some of them have even painted those armies themselves. But very few of them are really big lore guys. They don't really care. Even if they read the lore, they have a very much separation of lore and gameplay. And so the game has become more abstract. Like, why does that ability work that way? Because it's more balanced if it works that way. Not because it makes sense to work that way, but because it's more balanced to work that way. And I think this explains a lot of the reason why like armies have become, they look less like armies and they look more like a collection of units on the tabletop. Because a competitive player doesn't care if his army looks like an army. He doesn't care if it looks, he doesn't mind if it just looks like a random collection of the most efficient toys on the tabletop. It matters that he wins. It matters that things are predictable. That's why the flavor's gone. That's why the balance is gone. Because a competitive player wants to know when he's looking at the board that if I do X and then Y, I will achieve Z. If I do 1 and then 2, I will get to 3. If I do A and then B, I will get to C. I know I'm laboring the point, but that is what they want. They crave predictability. They crave control. They crave being able to get the desired result. And they hate the idea of something going wrong because it was out of their control. I actually had a very competitive player say to me recently that he was leaving 40k because the game was still too random. Now, I don't know much about Magic the Gathering, but he was going over to Magic the Gathering because it didn't involve any dice. And that blew my mind. That absolutely blew my mind, because 10th edition is the most predictable game. It's the least random it's ever been. all of this flavor and stuff has been sacrificed to, I don't know if appease is the right word, or to push this sort of competitive focus. And yet there are still people that find the game too random, who wouldn't be happy until dice were removed from 40k. Like, what? I know. But that's and I know we've got a little bit off topic there, so to bring it back onto focus, that's where the state of 40k right now is. It's very, this is the most competitively focused edition we've ever had. This is the least flavorful, least narratively focused edition that we've had. And it has been, and right now the state of the game is that the game is more balanced. There's outliers, of course, but generally speaking, the game is more balanced. We've been through a bit of a mad one with Grotmus, mad period, but things seem to be settling down again. The game is more balanced, yet seems to have lost more flavor, and yet there seems to be, it almost seems like nobody's happy with it. Casual and narrative players are going to other games because, I know so many people that have gone to Old World, so many people that have gone to Bot Action. I myself have been very, very tempted to get into Heresy after looking at the Imperialis militia rules. So many people who are more flavor and thematically inclined are looking at other game systems. And then competitive players, many of them are happy with the game, don't get me wrong, but there's still this sense of more could be done. In my mind, this is the state of the game right now. Where would I like the game to go? I think what we need is controlled randomness. Taking Old World, Orcs and Goblins as an example. In that game, Orcs and Goblins have a rule called Impetuous. If your unit is within charge range of the enemy unit, you have to roll a dice. On a 1 to 3, the unit has to try and charge. Even if it's at the max of charge range and it'll probably fail, it has to try and charge because they lose discipline. They're impetuous. They want to get into the fight. On a 4+, the unit does as it's told. Now, if you just introduce that rule into Orcs right now in 40k, that would be mad, right? Completely bonkers. No. Wait. But Old World has, and that's what Orcs used to be like that. Not that exact rule, but they used to be like that. Fully turbo random. No idea what was going to happen. But in Old World, they have that rule, and then they have the way to control it. Firstly, Night Goblins are not impetuous. Certain sub-factions in the roster are not impetuous. And secondly, you have Black Orcs, which quell impetuous. So anyone who's near a Black Orc unit, and that's whether it's a Black Orc boss or Black Orc unit, whatever it may be, any Black Orc unit, if your other units are nearby, they are no longer impetuous. This has created, in my opinion, the perfect example of how randomness should be in the game. Because there are loads of Orc and Goblin players who are more thematically inclined, more fluffy inclined, who purposely choose to not take Black Orcs, or to not take as many Black Orcs, and to have impetuousness as a factor in their army, because they want their army to feel like an Orc and Goblin army. They want it to feel like it's a barely controlled rabble. That's what they want to feel. But then you've got the people that really want to win with Orcs and Goblins. They're more competitively minded, and they're like, I put Black Orcs and Night Goblins all the time in my armies. I don't take anything with impetuous. And the funny thing is because there's enough variety of units, both sides are served. The side that doesn't like impetuous has enough options so that they don't have to interact with the randomness, and they can just focus on winning and doing the best plays.
Reporting for duty, sir.
And then you've got the side who loves the randomness, who can have as much of it in their army as they want, and then there's the people in between. That example right there is what I think 40k needs. As we're entering the last year of 10th edition, as we enter the last year of 10th edition, I think GW planning for 11th edition should bring the player-controlled randomness. With Chaos, you can bring back the Chaos Boon table, but make it a choice to roll on it. You don't have to roll on it. Make it a choice to roll on it. For Orks, have something like Impetuous, but have ways that it can be managed. For Tyranids, bring instinctive behavior back. Looking at Admech, for example. Admech are an army that it should feel like they're barely understanding the technology that they're wielding. They should be quirky. Admech aren't quirky right now. Admech should feel quirky. I had an idea where your units should be relatively, I would say, almost uncontrollable unless you have the relevant tech priests near them. So, if you've got like a bunch of Guitar who are mostly like fleshy or whatever, have a Magos biologist next to them. They can then do exactly as they're told. There's no like randomness, like, oh, they march off, they do an advance when they shouldn't do, and all this kind of stuff. If you've got a tech Genestealer next to your vehicles, they not only do you control the randomness, but they also get buffs. So it's not just you trying to stop its attacks to stop bad things happening. You're incentivized to take them for good reasons as well. But if they die, then maybe the Admech technology stops being done as told. You have a similar thing with like the Castellan robots, something like that. Adding this element of randomness, but it can be controlled by the player. So those who want to interact with it can, and those who don't want to interact with it don't have to. That is where I would like 40k to go to. Where it is right now, I think the game is done a very good job of standardizing competitive play, and of, even with wildcards like Mordaka and Unid out there, those are temporary problems that will be fixed. The game has done a relatively good job of balancing itself throughout 10th edition, with some, up and down a bit, but generally it's been pretty good. But I think what we need now is to bring the flavor back in. But all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What is your take on the current meta, both in the big picture and for your specific faction? And do you think that 40k needs to get more flavor back in there, and that there is this balance between the two? Or should 40k remain the competitively focused game, and other games should exist to help scratch different itches? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button, and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible, and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.